A new book is bringing renewed attention to an ongoing crisis in Nigeria. It's called Bring Back Our Girls, the untold story of the global search for Nigeria's missing schoolgirls. The book in itself is a testament to the strength of the hundreds of girls who resisted their captors. As you may recall, they were kidnapped by the terrorist group known as Boko Haram back in 2014. But the book goes beyond their abduction and dives into the relationships among terrorism, geopolitics, social media, local conflict, and American military intervention. Drew Hinshaw is one of the authors behind the book, and he's a friend of mine. He and I worked together in West Africa during the moment when those girls were kidnapped, and he joins us now to talk about his new book. Drew, it's good to see you, my friend. So one of the things that we want to hit on is how did social media play a role in the global search for the missing girls?
Right, and I'm sure you remember this, Vlad. These young women had been forgotten. They were lost for weeks. There was hardly a mention of them for weeks after their abduction. And then all of a sudden, millions of us started to click tweet, to talk about them. We covered them. The celebrities who we put a lot of stock in tweeted them about them. And all of a sudden, you had 7 foreign nations sent drones, special forces, spies to look for these young women. Mercenaries went to look for them. Satellites were looking for them. There was a multinational effort to find a group of young women who had been ordinary high school students just weeks earlier.
So what we're showing right now is a Michelle Obama tweet. She's holding up the Bring Back Our Girls, a hashtag. And you talk a little bit about hashtag advocacy, which has kind of been, people kind of made fun of it. It's a really easy way to prove that you're a social justice warrior or whatever. But you say, there's some good and there's some bad when it comes to hashtag advocacy.
For us, what we found is people said this is slacktivism. It makes no difference in the real world. And I just found that to be completely wrong. I mean, there was hundreds of millions of dollars of military equipment sent after these young women. The young women's lives changed immeasurably because of this. A war in the northeast of Nigeria, in a state in Nigeria where most people had never used the internet, was completely changed by this hashtag that caught fire. So I just find the idea that this is slacktivism, it makes no difference. That wasn't the case with this particular event.
Yeah, Drew, one of the things, and Anne-Marie has heard me say this before, talk about this, is that, up until April of 2014, thousands of school children in Nigeria had been either killed, had been abducted. In fact, the week, I don't, my dates may be off by a couple of days, but, in April of 2014 or in March, if you recall, Drew, there was a school of boys who Boko Haram set fire to their school, and those who managed to escape the fire had their throats slit. And that, I covered that story. I know you did and others did as well, but that did not get me on the air in the United States. It didn't rise to the level that we saw when just a few weeks later the girls in Chibok went missing. And I recall someone once telling me in Nigeria, thousands of people have been killed by Boko Haram in the United States. When 3 people were killed during the Boston Marathon terrorist attacks, the President of the United States went to Boston to comfort the citizens there and to comfort the families. And in Nigeria, that never happens when, hundreds or even thousands of children or people are taken and in some cases slaughtered by terrorist groups, specifically Boko Haram.
Right. These students started off as something called the Identifiable victim effect, where one tragedy allows you to connect to a broader conflict. At some point, and I'm sure you remember this, they became almost bigger, at least in the U.S., than the conflict. So the questions that the U.S. was getting was not, how are we helping Nigeria? How's the war going? It's, when are we going to see this one particular group of young women freed? Which was a great question, but it definitely tilted the direction of the conflict, at least in terms of foreign assistance.
So certainly the global attention made a huge difference, you're pointing out. But, there's military intervention, there was negotiations, but you also point out that the victims really sort of tried to take matters into their own hands. And one of the ways that they tried to resist and survive is by writing diaries, writing down the details of their mistreatment, and some of those diaries were smuggled out. I'm wondering if there's anything that you read that I can only imagine that there must be story after story, but was there any story that sort of rises above the rest?
There's so much when you look at these diaries that these young women kept tied to their bodies for years. There's so much in there, but they wrote home letters for Christmas. They wrote letters to their moms, their dads, that they didn't know if they'd ever get to deliver. They also were teenagers. They were writing lyrics to, pop songs that they knew back home. They were writing hymns. They were writing, Psalm 22:1, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" That was in there. They copied the book of Job because they had a Bible on them this whole time. They copied the Luke, the early parts of Luke, where Mary is having to walk across, to Bethlehem. They copied this stuff, and it became kind of a story of the power of religion in a way to help you maintain who you are in the face of adversity.
And as we have said, Drew, these girls are far from the only ones that were kidnapped by Boko Haram. What lessons, I guess specifically, what lessons has the Nigerian government learned from 2014? How have those lessons come to factor in how they search for other young women, other young boys, school children, other folks who have been kidnapped or even slaughtered by Boko Haram? Because you've written a lot about the fact that in some cases ransom is paid, and that has seemed on one hand to bring some of these children home, but on the other hand it has increased the number of kidnappings that have happened across northeastern Nigeria.
To your question, I still get emails from the Red Cross, and the number of Nigerians missing right now is 23,992. So this is one small fraction of a really large problem. And these 103 of these young women were freed with a ransom. And now, you do have to worry that one ransom causes another and another. We've seen 3 kidnappings in the past 2 months, mass kidnappings. These were resolved with what seemed to be small ransoms, tens of thousands of dollars. But it's become a pattern, and it's become more criminal than ideological, a pattern of abducting school children for quick money, and it's horrible. And you can understand as an American, we understand as well as any country could that schools are hard to protect, they're soft targets, but this is happening again and again and again, and it's really heartbreaking.
As you point out, these girls were targeted and attacked in their school. You've done a lot of reporting in the region. So I want to ask you sort of another kind of umbrella question about global human rights and what you've observed about the treatment of women and girls and their pursuit of education over the last few years. Have you seen anything changing or evolving? What's your take on the nature of the quality of life in some of these regions?
Right. I think on a global level, there's been a recognition of the price women and girls pay in conflicts. It's recognized that this is a frontline problem in a conflict like the Boko Haram conflict. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, I think it's just gotten worse and worse, and it's become it's become clear that if you are willing to do this kind of thing, to kidnap hundreds of young women, there are monetary rewards for it. And the state, the president, Buhari, Nigerian president, has been openly saying, we've got to stop paying ransoms. We've got to stop this somehow. And that's easy to say, but then you think, if those were my children, I'd pay any price on earth, So this is a really complicated problem. And in setting out to write about this one kidnapping that we all remember, we sort of wanted to make the point that this is hard, bringing back more than 100 missing young women in a middle of a conflict. It's easier, I guess, tweeted than done. It takes a lot of hard, thankless effort.
Drew, Anne-Marie makes the point about the young children, young girls specifically, in the northeastern part of the country where, and people will understand this if they read your book, there's a big difference between the northeastern part of Nigeria and the southern part and the middle part, where a lot of young girls do not receive educations. And so the notion already that a parent is putting a child in school is already a very, very big deal in that part of Nigeria. And recall back in 2014, the government was caught unawares by the media attention, by the scrutiny, by it wasn't just the Wall Street Journal and us, CNN and BBC, everybody. I saw U.S. broadcasters, CBS News, ABC News, NBC News sent reporters for the first time in a long time to Nigeria to try and understand what was going on there, and they were caught flat-footed. And the reason they were caught flat-footed is because up until that time, as we said, thousands of children had been killed or had gone missing, and the Nigerian government was sort of like, what are you going to do? These are poor people. They're not part of my constituency, so I'm not going to give it a lot of attention. And now that's changed, and so the government now is stuck in this between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, they want to bring these girls back, and President Buhari has been on the record as saying that he wants to do it, but they're doing it with these ransoms, and the world says, well, you shouldn't be doing that, but they say, well, then how are we supposed to get them back? What is the role of the military and law enforcement in trying to bring these girls back as opposed to using ransoms?
I can't but help but that there's got to be at some point some consequences for doing this. The people who took the Chibok girls, we write about a few of them. Most of those people are still alive and are still out there. There's been no consequences. Okay, you can understand bringing back young women when they're in the middle of this. You've brought some home. At some point, there's got to be is impunity. I guess I'm describing impunity, and it continues, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm saying it as a reporter who just spent years there, but I think anybody in the north of Nigeria experiences this, and not only from people who kidnap young women, but the military, commits crimes and enjoys impunity for it. Like you're saying, it's just continues.
Drew Hinshaw, it's very good of you to be sort of putting a spotlight back on this because though that particular case is over, as both of you guys point out, this is an ongoing issue in the area. So Drew Hinshaw, thank you so much.
Thank you too.